California Congresswoman Katie Hill. Congresswoman, thanks for coming on, and welcome to Washington.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Quite a welcome.
It is. It's an interesting time to start.
You are saying something that not a lot of other people in your party are saying. You are saying that you would support some funding for some kind of physical barrier at the border. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two main points to consider. The first is that we can't talk about any of this until the government's open. My district has a huge number of federal employees. We have the Palmdale Regional Air Traffic Control Center, which controls all flights into Southern California, so you can imagine how busy that is. We have a federal prison that literally houses former terrorists, that prison guards are working without pay. They're essential personnel. We have so many federal employees, many of whom are law enforcement, that are still on the job, and they're law enforcement professionals. And so, to have this conversation about what border security should look like it has to open the government first.
So when you say you support some kind of a physical barrier, what specifically are you talking about? Are you willing to put a dollar amount or any kind of hard data in terms of what you would support physically at the border?
Well, I think that's the challenge, right, is that we have to air this out in an open process. We need to hear from the experts on both sides. We have to hear from the sheriffs, for example, that work at the border. We have to hear from Border Patrol. We have to hear from, mayors from the towns that are actually right there on the border as to what they feel is needed. We know that there's already fencing and other physical barriers across the border in many different places, but there are gaps, and we need to find ways of filling those gaps, repairing the fencing. So I think that for many of us, there's not really doubt that some kind of physical barrier is necessary. I think the challenge is that we've gotten so hung up on these semantics, really on both sides. And gosh, I can't tell you how much I've come to hate the word wall. And I think many of us have, because it's unnecessary, right? Like in the campaign, President Trump was fixated on this wall, and I think we on the Democratic side of the aisle have such a gut reaction to it because it's associated with this sort of hateful rhetoric. But in reality, we need to step back, all of us, step back and say, okay, concrete wall, 2,000 miles long, never going to happen. Bad idea. President has walked that back. Most Republicans have walked that back. But Democrats are for border security, too. And we know that part of that does include physical barriers.
Do you wish that other Democrats would come forward and say, I would at least support some part of funding for some kind of barrier at the border? I mean, Speaker Pelosi has just said flat out, no, nothing, no dollars.
I think what she said is that we're not going to give any dollars to the wall. So again, this is a semantics issue more than anything else. And so what I'd like to see is all of us, again, taking a step back. We do need to really lay the groundwork, and I'm hoping that President Trump will come to the table on this, is that let's stop using federal workers' lives as a political pawn in this, and let's say, all right, we're going to open the government. Democrats want a lot, too, on this immigration debate. Regardless of the border security piece, we have this DACA issue that remains unresolved. We have these TPS recipients that are desperate. We have, we have real issues around immigration that we've been trying forever, and we have things we want to negotiate on. So let's open it. Then let's go to the table.
Do you agree with how your fellow California Congresswoman, Speaker Pelosi, do you agree with how she's been handling these negotiations?
I think she's in a very tough position. We are a huge tent conference, right? The Democratic caucus is massive, and our ideology runs the entire spectrum. So she's in a position where you have to represent that entire spectrum. And, remember, we're coming off of an election where the Republican side closed their argument with immigration with this fear around the caravan, and it didn't work. So I think we're in a place where the people who elected us are saying, don't give in on this. This is, this isn't what we elected you for. And so there's a place where we have to draw the line. But I think that line that we're all consistent on as Democrats is that open the government first, then we'll talk. You will not get everyone happy on either side of the aisle with whatever solution we end up landing on.
You have described what President Trump is doing, his strategy here, as political terrorism. That's a very strong word. Do you stand by that?
I do, because the definition of terrorism is using fear and striking fear in the hearts of people to get a political end. And that's what's happening, right? Fear of missing a paycheck, which has now happened, fear of not being able to pay your bills, fear of missing critical services, fear of whether we're going to have plane crashes because we're missing on critical aviation personnel, fear on the southern border patrol agents aren't being paid. So I think that use of leverage is in a way inciting terror.
Well, and President Trump kind of counters that by saying, he believes that Democrats are the ones holding these furloughed federal employees hostage. So there's plenty of blame to go around and pointing of fingers, but now this is the longest shutdown in history. So endgame, how do you see this ending really quickly?
Endgame, I would say that to my Republican colleagues and, even to Mr. Trump, we're here. Many of us are here, and we're ready to talk. But the first step is open this government, help the people who are struggling. Again, my district, I have a single mom, a veteran, an air traffic controller who is struggling. Open it, then let's talk.
All right, I got to leave it there, Congresswoman. But thank you for being one of the few congressmen and women and senators to actually stay in D.C. this weekend during the shutdown. Appreciate it.